And we are now live. Gentlemen, welcome. How are you guys doing today?
Hello, welcome, all good. Thank you very much.
Good, how are you?
Yeah, all good. All good. Ready for the long weekend, definitely at this point.
Looking forward to a bank holiday.
Yeah, very much so. Guys, today I'm joined by Jim and Marc, who are going to be talking about Fujinon's MK series of lenses. If you have any questions during the talk, just put them in YouTube. I'm going to feed them straight into the boys here, and then we can get them answered. Gents, over to you.
Thank you, Jake, and thank you everyone for watching. My name is Marc Cattrall. I work for Fujinon in the UK. I'm joined here by Jim Marks, who I've known for many years, who is DP. You can introduce yourself, Jim.
Hello, I'm Jim. Yes, we've known for a long time, haven't we, Marc? I shoot a whole range of stuff, commercials, small features, and yes, we go way back, way back.
So the purpose of this presentation really is to just give you an update, because our MK lenses, they were actually released 3 years ago, 2017, which doesn't seem real, but they've been out for 3 years now. They were originally designed to be working with FS7, FS5 cameras by Sony E-mount. Obviously, the landscape of cameras has changed quite a lot since then, and we've been working with a lot of third parties like MTF Service in the UK or Duclos Lenses in the USA to try to enable users of other camera systems to be able to see the benefits of MK. So really today we're going to go through those other camera systems. We'll have a little bit of focus on the FX9, which you can see in the background on Jim's camera. A bit of a focus on FX9, but also talk about other camera systems, and also just a bit of a recap about what MK lenses can actually do for you and help you in your productions. So, Jake, if you could get us started.
So that's definitely the wrong mouse that I've just went to use.
That's good.
There you go.
It's good.
Okay, so this is just a bit of a recap about MK lenses. So there's a pair of lenses. 18 to 55 and 50 to 135. They're identical size and weight. They are real spherical cine lenses, which means they're parfocal. They have no breathing, all the things you'd expect from cine lenses. And they have a cinematic look that matches with our other range of cinema lenses, our Cabrios, Premieres, and Premistas. Jake, I don't know if it's just stopped. I was expecting more to come up. There we go. So there's third-party drive units available, and as I said before, the thing we're really talking about today is that they're available for a wide range of cameras.
And that's what drew me in, I have to say, is the fact I have now used these. I think I've used these on 5 different cameras, these lenses. So that I think is a really important thing.
And that's also the reason why I asked Jim to join me today, for that
Yes.
exact reason, that this is a man who's actually shot with these lenses on quite a lot of productions, and hopefully he'll share a lot of his experience. So the first thing we'll do is I'll just go through a little bit of footage that Jim shot in his garden. This is lockdown footage.
Oh, yes.
Which basically just shows the different focal lengths that these two lenses give you.
Yeah, so this is actually using the focal marks on the actual barrel of each lens, just to show you the focal length through both in the set. So we start at 18, and then we travel in to 22, 25, 30, 36, 40, 45, 50, 55, and then we're swapping glass in a quick magic way back to 50, and then into 55, 65, 75, and 100, getting near the tight end. And it should go on a tiny bit more. Or is it paused? It seems to have paused, but we're going to blame Jake.
There we go.
120 and 135 at the end. So you can see massive range of focal lengths from the wide all the way through to nice and tight.
And just to reiterate as well, obviously they are parfocal, so the whole way through the statue was in focus.
Yes.
As it was moving through, and they're 2.9 all the way. There's no ramping off at the end.
I was at T4 just for that little demo, and the camera was absolutely static and literally didn't change anything, just zoomed in, using the marks on the barrel as we went.
Okay, so Jake, next slide. So this is something that's kind of semi-announcement, I guess. We are working with Duclos in the USA to develop an RF mount that will allow the MK lenses to go on the new RRED Komodo when the new RRED Komodo is obviously released. Now, we've been talking to RRED, and I think obviously, as all things with the COVID-19 crisis, I think that the delivery date for that and the release date is still unknown. It was kind of planned to be around Cine Gear sort of time. But we've been, the mount now exists. Obviously, Duclos has had to slow down a bit as well because people are working from home. And it's that photo there was given to us by Matt, who has successfully got it working on a EOS R. It's the slight change between this one and previous lens mounts adapters that we've done are this is almost a destructive process. So in order to get the flange back focus to work on the RF mount, the MK lens kind of needs to be modified. Now, where you can see me, but sort of it kind of goes a little bit further in. So this part of the lens has to be removed in order for the RF mount to be attached. So once you've had it converted to an RF, or if you buy it already as an RF, the likelihood is it's going to live its life as an RF.
I think it's really exciting to have something that light with a lens that weighs that little in a complete package. That's very promising.
And especially with the price point that we're expecting for the Komodo, I think the Komodo and the MK lenses should become a pretty good combination. So just to talk about image circle, because obviously this is the thing that really matters. Do the lenses cover? Now on the MK lenses, our spec says it's a 28.5 millimeter image circle, and the illumination circle is 29.6 millimeters. Now, this is, being a Japanese company, we like to kind of under-spec, over-deliver. So that is the absolute worst case of image circle and illumination circle that you'll get out of these lenses. So that means T22 at the widest setting. This is, whatever combination of focal length and T-stop and even focus position that you put in, that's the worst case it would be. So as you see on the screen, you can see the different sensor modes that we have managed to get from information around the web, because obviously RRED haven't fully confirmed this yet. The 16:9 shooting mode in 6K is smaller than our worst case scenario image illumination circle. Obviously the 4K and 5K well covered, and then also the 6K 2.4:1 ratio will also be covered. When it comes to the open gate, which we don't assume many people will be shooting anyway, it's a slightly larger sensor than the camera, than the lens illumination circle. However, you will find in a lot of situations, like for example, if you don't shoot less than say T8, if you go between 2.9 and T8, for example, you probably won't have any problems at all.
Brilliant. It's so flexible.
So now to talk about a current camera rather than a future camera, and Jim's going to take over a lot more now, so you don't have to keep listening to my voice. Now, obviously, just before we do that, I'll just mention that this is a native E-mount, obviously, and the lens is native E-mount, the camera is native E-mount, so there's no adapters needed or conversions. It does not cover 6K full-frame sensor. It just doesn't. There's no combination of focal lengths and T-stops that will do that. It will cover the 16:9 4K Super 35 and the new 17:9 DCI 4K that's been recently announced in the firmware update. Jim, tell us your thoughts before Jake moves the slides about why you still think that the MK lens... Actually, I don't want to put too many words in your mouth. Tell us about MK and FX9.
Well, FX9 is a relatively new camera, obviously. I think... Oh, hello. Oh, we've gone big. That's nice. I first got the MKs and I had a GH5, and we adapted that very early on with MTF, and then we had the GH5S, Blackmagic 4K. He's now adapted to an S1H for the L mount, and then of course we've got E mount, which is with FX9. So for me, the key thing is that's 5 different camera systems, one lens. Okay, this lens has paid for itself many times over. Cameras change, glass stays the same. And obviously it's not autofocus, but in some ways I find that an advantage. It's easy, it's light, so it fits on the shoulder. It's very simple. Both the lenses are identical, so they hop swap very, very quickly. I can support them here. I always use a lens support, whatever the camera, because even though they're very, very light, obviously, they're quite long, so I wouldn't want to, you wouldn't want to knock it on something. But I was drawn to the MKs because of the flexibility that they offer across different camera mounts, and actually the color and the image that we'll talk about a bit later. I seem to have frozen, Jake, in time with my hand like that. I'm not sure whether that's happening on your feed. Can you take me back to the graphic just for a second? Oh,
We moved a bit.
I love technology. No, I'm pulling a lovely face there.
No, you are live still, and yeah,
I'm live.
I think you're
Fantastic.
praised.
Every lens that anybody ever uses is a compromise and a balance between features and weight. But what I like about this is it works on a whole range of cameras. It's T2.9, so it's fast enough. I know it's not wide fast, but it's actually perfectly good. I get a lovely, out of focus, which we'll show you later, quality to it. And primarily, it's the weight and the balance and being able to put it on different cameras, as well as the color that we'll speak about, that kind of got me into that lens and why I use it. And it's adaptable. Why not use primes? Why am I using the zoom? Because a lot of what I shoot, I can't plan, and I have to adapt to it very quickly. I haven't got time. I want to zoom because it speeds the whole process, the whole creative process up. If a director wants to go wide, I can be wide. If we need to go tighter, I'm literally, all I'm doing is just dialing it in there as quickly as that. So it gives me that speed of production. Now we've just moved on to another slide.
That's okay. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, though, I think you're over the top of the 16:9 spec, but that's okay. Yeah, so obviously, as I said before about the image circle, the 6K full frame is definitely not going to cover. 4K 17:9 and 4K 16:9 will cover. I think with the 17:9, I understand, and again, everyone's always going to test these things. I think at the 18mm, you might get a tiny bit of sort of darkened corners when you're very, very sort of small t-stop, like a T8 or smaller. Now the 17:9, the 5K 17:9,
yes,
16:9. Now this one's interesting because this has obviously been announced in a recent firmware update. So we're not 100% sure of how.
But we're excited. We're excited because of what it could offer.
But as I mentioned before, the different focal lengths and different t-stops can produce slightly different image and illumination circles. So there may be, we're not gonna hold our hands up and say it's compatible, because it definitely isn't. But there may be certain situations where you are able to use the 5K full frame. So this for full frame, they call it full frame crop mode. With the MK lenses.
This is version 2 of the Sony firmware upgrade that's just been announced. It's meant to be coming in October. I think everyone who has this camera, their ears pricked up when they announced the 5K scan. It's 18% smaller than full frame, which is obviously a teeny-weeny amount. But as Marc mentioned, because the image circle is slightly bigger and conservative in Japan, we are hopeful that it's going to be very close, so that we'll be able to get 50 frames per second in 5K on this camera with this lens, which would be fantastic.
So next slide, Jake. So this is a nice table that I just kind of borrowed from Sony. So you can see here the everything in the Super 35 box is definitely covered by the MK lenses. And that means 50 frames per second or 60 frames per second at 4K 16:9. And then when the new firmware comes in October, you'll have the same 4K 17:9, a DCI 4K 17:9. But then, as you can see in the dotted line, that's where we're saying, well, yes, there's a possibility that the lenses will work, so you'll be able to shoot with the 5K crop.
I mean, even if
60 frames per second.
Even if it's just like a 3% push in the edit, it's going to make it incredibly usable. It's going to be great.
But again, and this is a thing that actually Jim mentioned to me a while back about FX9 and MK lenses was the frame rates. Is that even if you've upgraded to an FX9 from an FS7, there's a lot of benefits to upgrade and certainly in image quality, but having to use the entire 6K full frame sensor, which then obviously oversamples down to produce a 4K image, is not the be all and end all. There are still other features of the camera that makes it an upgrade while still using Super 35 glass.
And I think all these camera systems, all of the full frame camera systems that have a Super 35 mode, I mean, heavens, we all have tons of Super 35 glass. That's not redundant, and there are many aesthetic choices where you sometimes need to be closer. It's lovely to have that choice, but there's many reasons why you want to be Super 35 on particular jobs.
Okay, next slide, Jake.
That's my garden again.
Take us through your rig.
Oh God! Well, this is already evolved since I took this picture. I've now got a core battery plate on the back for a V-lock. It's just showing you just quickly from a side view of how well balanced it can be with the lens on. I've got a Vocas sliding plate. Now, the reason I've got that is because with different glass, the weight point on my shoulder obviously moves. So I know some other brands fix it in the middle, which might be fine, but that does really limit you if you want to put it on your shoulder. So I need to have a plate that can move backwards and forwards, because depending what I have up here or back here, weight-wise, that's going to affect where I want my center of gravity to be on that camera, and that's really, really important. If I go from the front, I've got wooden camera handles. I've actually done a little homebrew trick. I'm not currently using the hand grip because it won't fit in the bag. Don't laugh at me. So I've got a lank release on the front here that I've just screwed in, and then I run that back on the right hand side. I've got a little L-Crom follow focus, mainly because it's small and it just slips onto the gears very easily, and that allows me to still have my handles in the upright position. So actually, here we go. You can see me again. So that just pops straight like so, and then I've got those quick release rosettes. So now it will go in the bag. I know this sounds a bit silly, but I need it to be able to go in the bag fully built and come out of the bag fully built and go to work like almost straight away. So that allows me to very quickly move through there. Got my support because I must support my lens. Got my little zoom there. I've talked about this. Obviously, you've got a handle on the top. I've actually got a Chameleon Pro there. I'm slightly strange. I'm left eye dominant. So obviously my EVF needs to come out a bit further than some people. Bit of wooden camera on there to hold that. I mean, I don't know if, like most people who do this for a living, I have a giant box of bits that I have gathered over the years, and I kind of build a combination of many different bits to make a rig that works for me. I've moved the viewfinder, which is now touchscreen, or shortly will become a touchscreen, to the back. Okay, so that'll allow me to go through my menus, change my settings there. It'll probably move even further back. And I tend to have an Atomos Shinobi or a Ninja 5, depending if I'm doing off-camera recording, and that will sit sort of here. This slides forward like so. That would go there. So it's really adaptable. And then the core back for V-locks and for power. So that's kind of how it runs. And the whole beauty of it is that I can just put it in the bag, turn it off, open the bag, turn it on, pull it out, up it goes, and I can shoot straight away. I don't want to be building the camera up when I get places or when I need to change things. That's why I love the zooms, because it's just very adaptable and versatile. Does that sort of give you a quick look?
Yeah, it's good.
And obviously, one more thing I forgot to say is if I want to change that lens, all I actually do is release my focus, unscrew my support, and it pops out. And so I'll just do that again because I'm on a big screen. So if I want to change glass, all I'm doing is that. I'm then releasing this, unscrewing that, undoing that. That pops straight out. New one in, lock, support, back in. So it's as quick as that. It's really, really fast. Nothing actually has to move or change. There you go.
Cool. So next slide, Jake. So this is a different direction. So obviously, the Panasonic S1H is the first Netflix-approved mirrorless camera, which has made it incredibly popular all over the market, to be honest. It's very cost-effective, and as Jim mentioned earlier on, the conversion kit from MTF, you can just put it on and off with, if you want it to be E or L, you can switch yourself as long as you're very careful with the screws. And I think that's only around £200 or something for the conversion kit from MTF.
I think it's £225, which is ridiculously cheap. It's charged double.
So similar. Go on.
And I was going to say, this is a big deal because I don't think we knew at the beginning that this was possible. We knew we could do micro four thirds, and I think when MTF discovered they could do L mount, I think it's fantastic because it just opens out a whole load of new cameras.
Yeah. So as with the FX9, it doesn't cover the full frame 5.9K, but obviously it's full coverage on the Super 35 4K. One thing that's obviously been updated in our presentation in the last week is this RAW. Before it was coming soon, whereas now it has I think Atomos released or announced something recently with ProRes RAW. Tell us about ProRes RAW, Jim.
ProRes RAW. What can I say about ProRes RAW? Well, I've been lucky enough to have a beta copy of it, and in fact, if you look at the launch, the image on the recorder is one of mine, and that's of a deer. I went out and filmed some deer in Richmond Park.
Before lockdown?
Sorry? It was pre-lockdown. It was pre-lockdown. I wasn't bothering animals illegally. But yes, incredibly sharp. I mean, 6K RAW in a package that small with a lens like this. I personally, if it was me, I would still run in a half cage with some very light bars underneath. Okay, because I think you still need to make that bond between a longer lens and the body. But yeah, I mean, what a powerful package! You can put it anywhere. You can go to work on a motorcycle. It's going to fit. You can fly with it. You can have two of them in your overhead. But that's of course when we're allowed to fly again.
It's a pair plus everything you need to shoot for less than £10,000, so you don't need to put it on a carnet when you're traveling around the world. Exactly. So it's just showing the adaptability. It's lovely to be able to use them. I know we're in 4K Super 35 mode on the S1H, but that opens up for frame rates again, and it's just showing that it's the adaptability across different platforms. I think people also have to understand when they say, "Oh, but why isn't it full frame?" Well, it would be bigger, wouldn't it, and heavier. There's always that compromise. Don't forget the weight and the flexibility, and that's because of the way it's designed. Next slide, Jake.
Ah.
So here's a flashback. There's Jim in the background there with slightly longer hair when he was allowed to go out.
Yeah, that was outdoors. That was lovely. That was when we first managed to build a Frankenstein rig with a GH5 and a GH5S, and we did the first adapter. And if you look very closely at the front of the lens hood, you'll see that there is what appears to be an ND in there, because the challenge is, how do I get an ND on the front in cameras that don't have an ND? Okay, and what I managed to do, I think it was SLR Magic ND, I took off the little handle, okay, and then I managed to squeeze it inside the original hood, inside the original Fuji hood, and don't laugh, and you could turn it still.
I'm not laughing.
So this is what I do late at night. I don't go out. And it just allowed that flexibility. So suddenly I had that tiny camera package. All right, I didn't actually have to put more on the front just to run an ND. I could stick it within the original hood. It's great.
And you also used the Pocket Cinema 4K with this as well.
I have. Gives you about. I mean, obviously, what I would say on Micro Four Thirds, if you times it by 2, it's actually a tiny bit wider, especially on the GH5S, where the sensor is slightly bigger than the GH5. It was equating to about 33mm on the wide end. Okay, for my work, that was fine. All right, so that worked well. So that gives you an idea. So you were roughly getting a 33 to 110, 115 on the 18 to 55.
Okay, so on the next slide, so here is, we can talk a little bit about colors here. So this is a shot that Jim's set up, and there is the equating shot. So talk to me. Tell me about colors.
Colors. A wiser person than me once said, lenses are the new film stock, and they definitely are. If I had to sum up Fuji colors for me personally, it's that they have incredibly pure and good blues and greens, but they're neutral in tone. Okay, so that you know that the blues and the greens are always going to pop, but the whites will be neutral. That's kind of how I would sum it up, which is very good for commercial work. It's a lovely clean place to start in a grade. Often doesn't need a grade at all. I can tell you with this particular shot, I added 5% saturation and sent it out the door. Do you know what I mean? That's literally what I did to it. I probably shouldn't have told you that, because I'm probably sure I told you I graded it for days.
Yeah, you're in
yeah. But literally, you want to get your camera profile, whatever camera you're using, and your glass to work in harmony. And oh god, here's a wonderful Frankenstein rig. Yes, so you can see. You just go back one tiny bit. Cheers, Jake. You can see up. Yeah. This is what, again, back when we were allowed to go places. You see, I've got a Hawkwood custom-built MPF power adapter at the back that was running that was powering the follow focus. At the front, you can see how small the actual package is. If I took the battery off and stuck it somewhere else, you can pop on, and that was just on a slider, keeping it nice and light. And just actually, you can see the blues popping in that, and we just moved in and out. You can keep moving, Sir Jake. Thanks.
Okay, so another camera that certainly, or another mount system that definitely need to mention is the Fuji X mount. I've got a little bit more info later on in the presentation about the XT4, but this is just to mention at this time that one of the advantages of using the MKX, well, the biggest advantage is that it has electronic contacts. In every other way, it's exactly the same as a normal, an E-mount MK lens. But with the X mount, there's electric contacts that allows the information from the lens to be passed to the camera. The biggest real life advantage for this is if you're shooting with the XH1 or the XT4, which both have in-body image stabilization, is that as you change the focal length, you don't need to tell the camera that the focal length has changed in order to update the stabilizer. So if this is on a drone or any kind of rig where you can't get to the camera to tell it, that's quite a significant advantage. So move on, Jake. So this is just an overview. I'm just checking what.
That is a lot of cameras you've got there.
So obviously underneath me is RF. So as you can see, yeah, E and X, a native Micro Four Thirds, FZ, L mount, and RF mount are all available via third-party adapters. In the case of the first three, they're all, you can kind of, once you've bought the adapter, or not the adapter, sorry, it's a different mount. So once you've got the mount, you can change between E and the mount that you have. And in the case of the RF, it's going to be a permanent switch. I don't know if there's any questions yet, but I was hoping, Jake's just beating me to it, this is fine, that the one question that we get asked a lot is about EF mount. We get told that if we could do this in EF mount, then this would be much more popular and it would open it up to use a lot more cameras, which is true. The reason that we cannot use an EF mount is basically explained in this slide here. So the lens has been designed for an 18mm flange focus point. So from the last element of the lens to where the actual image can be focused onto an image plane has to be 18mm. That's the flange depth. There is a little bit of play in that the cameras all have a back focus adjustment, but that back focus adjustment only really allows you maybe 5mm in either direction. For Micro Four Thirds, for FZ for RF, and for L, the depth of the lens, the depth of the mount, kind of gives you a little bit more, which allows the lenses to still focus. Obviously, if you change the mount, you need to update the back focus. But in the case of EF, which is about 44 millimeters, and here you can see the PL, which is 50 something millimeters.
52.
If you were gonna 52, if you were gonna place the MK lens on a PL mount, there's a big gap there between where the focal plane is and where the focus plane needs to be. So here now you see this is where the lens needs to be mounted. And if you imagine where the PL mount was, the mount is going to be halfway up the lens, and there's going to be lens elements protruding into the body. So
the irony is you showed a Venice, of course, which
of course, yeah,
upon which you can remove and unscrew that PL mount, and there's an E mount underneath, so you could actually then do that. Yeah.
So in this case, in that example there, I imagine that was an ARRI Alexa or something. Yes, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah.
But in the case of the Venice, yes, you can take off the PL mount. And we know of a few productions that have been using MK lenses on the Rialta, on the Venice in 4K, and you think about how lightweight that system ends up being. But that's the reason why we can't do EF. It's unfortunately a physical limitation for that focus, the flange focus. So next slide.
Oh.
So Jim has been.
Yes.
Go, Jim.
Well, no, just go back one if you can on the slide, sir. Thank you. Thanks very much. Now I've got a little toy. In ever dreaming of cheap ways, not cheap, cost-effective ways of creating anamorphic imagery. So these lenses have a little trick with the SLR Magic adapter. It's a 1.3 anamorphic adapter. It's a front adapter that screws straight onto the front. I think it's around the £800 mark, or around just below £1,000. Sounds a lot of money. In anamorphic terms, that's incredibly cheap, and it can work on both lenses. It screws directly in on the front. And the beauty of I've taken the same image just to show you the difference that it can make. If we can roll on one, sir. Now, obviously, the FX9 doesn't have a D-squeeze in camera. So actually, I've got an Atomos Shinobi here, which is a great little monitor. And you can see on top, I've got it at 1.3 squeeze. And I think in a second, if we roll on, thank you. See, so here we have 16:9. That's Sock Monster posing for me. And then look, there's his cinematic dream. And I think if we click on to the next one, it's got the two. Yeah. So just so you can see here, I thought this was quite fun. Obviously, it's my garden again because I'm being very good, staying in. You can see the 16:9, nicely composed. And then actually, if you look to the right and you see the 1.3 D squeeze, you can actually see you can actually see the rubbish on the left-hand side that I tried to hide. You can see my rubbish boxes on the left-hand side of the garden. And if you count the number of extra struts on the chair, there's an extra 3, I think, there on the chair. So you can see how your image, you get a much more cinematic looking image for relatively little outlay. 800 quid, it screws on the front. The only caveat I would say, the only negative, it's not negative, it's a workaround, is that because there's focus here and then focus front on the adapter, you do need a PD movie, here's one we made earlier, follow focus system, because it has a dual controller. That would allow you to run focus here and focus there on a single thumb wheel. So that would allow you to pull focus should you need to. That's the only caveat to that. But otherwise, it's a brilliant way of making those lenses suddenly give you that anamorphic look.
So here are some examples from a film that Alistair Chapman shot. But yeah, you can see that there's a distinctive sort of anamorphic bokeh, and also different looking flares. Flares is something that I think we're going to be talking about next.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's quite difficult to get the MK lens to flare in the first place. But when it does, it certainly does more when you got the anamorphic adapter on.
On the point of flares, I would say if you were to look at the older SLR Magic anamorphics, they had so many blue flares. It was a very acquired taste. It was everything you shot looked like Star Trek. whether you wanted it to be Star Trek or not. With this adapter, because it's a front adapter and because they've calmed it down a bit, you still get some flaring, but personally, it's much more controlled, so you could use it in a wider range of productions.
Okay. So moving on. So we mentioned before about the colors. I asked Jim to give me his opinion, and this is a little bit more of a technical explanation now as to show, firstly, why our color science is like it is, but also a thing I really want to get across to people is how important consistency is to us. So the graph that you see at the moment is a typical lens. I can't remember which brand, but it's a very typical lens. And you can see from top to bottom is the transmittance value. And as you go through the graph, you can see that the reds are transmitting more than the blues. To us, the most important thing is to get all visible light to be transmitted and for it to not be adjusted at all. So it needs to try to remain balanced so that there's no color shift. So if you just click on one, Jake. Now this is basically what you see on the left. There's a new line. I'll come to the explanation what's going on the chart on the right in a moment. But the new line on the left, the green line, you can see that this is a Fujifilm lens, Fujinon lens, Fujifilm, same. And as you can see, the transmittance in the blue and in particularly in the green is a lot higher, which doesn't give a blue or green image, but it just basically balances it out a little bit more. So
that's borne out by my eyes, because you showed me this chart after we'd discussed color, and
you'd already told me what you said.
And I'd already told you, which either makes me very clever or just lucky. I'm not sure which.
Or it just means that it's true.
Yeah, or it's true, exactly.
Yeah, and then what you see here on the right, this is called a CCI chart. So I'm going to say it's reasonably self-explanatory. You can see each dot represents a different lens, and all of the green lenses are Fuji lenses, and those are all of our cinema lenses. They're MK lenses, Cabrios, Premieres, Premistas, all in there with those green dots. The orange dots are from a very, very high end. I'm not going to name it because it's not about naming names at all, but a very high end set of cinema primes. That is the same set of lenses. And as you can see, along the kind of the yellow and blue axis, even though the blue axis is hidden underneath Jim's picture, along the yellow and the blue axis, there's quite a large shift. Now, it isn't a large shift; it's a tiny shift, but it's all relative. But the point that I'm trying to make by showing you this is that our tolerance in our factory to make sure that all of the coatings retain the same color balance through all of our lenses is very, very important to Fuji. And we also have a lot more lens elements than most lenses do because ours are zooms rather than primes. And also those blue dots on there, they are another very high-end set of zoom lenses from the same range. So they're not these are subtleties, but what we want is for someone to be able to know that they can shoot with an MK and there's the color is going to match between the two. If they start shooting with Cabrios or Premieres or even Premistas and still shooting with MKs, they're all going to match. There's no difference between the color balance between any of our lenses. If you move on. And then we mentioned flares and black levels. So this is, again, just something that's been in our lenses since the Cabrio range. So Cabrios, MKs, and Premistas. I don't think it's as prevalent in the Premieres, but simply because back when the Premieres were made, the HDR capabilities of cameras wasn't at the same level. But essentially, you see in the top left here, there's a frame where there is a chair with something black on it. There's a lot of backlight, which has caused basically caused the blacks to raise slightly and become slightly milky. And the reason for that is in the bottom left, you can see these are light rays shining through a lens, and every lens element, there's light that's bouncing into the side of the barrel that shouldn't be there, that is eventually ending up on the sensor. So once you've got all this bright light coming from the front, some lenses making it through, which is the reason why that image in the top right is not completely black. So if you just jump it on one, Jake. So this is how we have we've worked against this is that within the lens, any of those points where light is able to bounce and reflect and carry on passing through to the sensor, there are just basically points in the lens to absorb that light. And I don't know if you can see that, it's quite small on that image, but and these is throughout the MK lens, and as I said, mentioned between our Premista and our Cabrio range as well, they all have this to stop light going through, to maintain the black to be as low as possible. If you're nowadays, cameras are always telling you about how many stops of light that they can capture. It doesn't matter if the lens isn't allowing the camera to do its job in the first place, and that's why for us, HDR has been an important part. And this is one of the ways that we counter the black levels being lifted.
Yeah, the only point we're here, I was going to add was actually about flare and diffusion. I think there's a fashion at the moment, you see it a lot with primes, to have uncoated lenses, to have flary lenses. What I like about is, and even the bigger glass is that I can use it. You don't want to treat. You have a lovely clean image. I can diffuse that and I can change it. But if it comes from an uncoated flary point, I can't go back the other way. And actually, go on.
No, it's fine. No, I agree. And then lenses are paintbrushes, aren't they? They are the creative part, like you mentioned before. Fujifilm's philosophy is really to kind of fill the bucket up as much as possible, because you can always knock things back later. That doesn't mean it's right either. If you know that the shoot that you're doing and you're going to be renting in lenses, for example, then you can rent in the exact ones that have the exact level of distortion or flaring or whatever you want. Whereas because of MK lenses being more of an owner-operator investment, to us, the idea of, like I said, being as accurate as possible to start with in terms of color, to have as much control over the flares as you possibly can. So these examples that you see here, the top left, the white, the blacks have been lifted completely, and there's no real detail left in the dress. The bottom left is where the flares, kind of like you were describing, where the flare's gone a little bit out of control, and you can't really take that back later. And then the one on the main image there is from the MK, where you can actually see there's still detail in the lady's dress because the blacks haven't been lifted. There are still flares. There is still an aesthetic look there, but it's not completely overpowering.
I mean, a little trick
do a lot with that image.
A little trick that I do, if you don't want to run a matte box and you don't want to run larger filters, is just to do a screw-in 82mm Pro Mist at a quarter, Pro Mist black, and that just takes the contrast down, blooms your highlights a little bit. I prefer a quarter, an eighth is not really enough, a half is too much. So, everyone's different, but that's just a cheap way. If you want it to soften things, if you want more bloom in your highlights, you just screw it on the front, dead easy.
Yeah. So next slide. So this is just going to be a short film. This is just a little video just to give you a demonstration of breathing and also what the bokeh looks like. Hopefully it will look nice on YouTube. But you can see with the focus being racked, there's absolutely no movement at all in the edge of the frame. So there's no focus, no focal length being changed. Jim actually did a nice film for us to use there as well, but
have you cut me?
We decided to go with beautiful fields to remind people of what outside.
I just think you don't like my sock monster. That's what it is.
I love the sock monster. Jake's
Sorry.
having a little.
No, I just I just clicked on the right. Sorry, guys.
You're interested in something.
Oh man. No, I was looking at you guys. I grabbed my mouse and hit the wheel by accident, and the wheel moved the slide. I was like, oh,
just fell
my
asleep,
bad.
didn't he?
No.
Anyway, another good example. Get to see the example of what outdoors used to look like. Everybody. I hope you're all playing.
I think it's the lack of shift in the image though that's the most important thing we're looking at there.
Yeah. To bring it back.
Yeah. And we're going to go backwards and forwards all day until Jake pushes.
No.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go.
Wait.
Okay, so again, this is some kind of just features of the lenses. Jim can you can go through that list there and basically pick out things that actually really matter to you as a filmmaker. Tell us.
I think the gear pitch is important because that makes sense. It fits with all the gear you've got. Identical size and weight is vital because you can hot swap in a matter of seconds between the two. Consistent iris scale and a smooth iris ring, so you can dial it in and out. For me, the 200-degree focus is a lovely midpoint. Okay, if it was more, I think for the solo operator it becomes quite hard because you can't dislocate your wrist when you go round if it's on your shoulder. So more than 200, you're getting into difficulty where you need a remote operation, and these lenses are used by people on their shoulder a great deal. It strikes that nice balance, and having comfortably more than a stills lens to give you control, but not too much that you can't use it on your shoulder. So 200 degrees is a very nice spot. 85 front and an 82 filter thread, which is great because you can get normal filters that don't cost a fortune, and you can just screw them straight on. So yes, covered everything there. This masterpiece. This is standard. This is an 18 to 55. That's 55, and then just look how close the camera is to him. I'm a bit quick that, but doesn't matter. It shows you what it is. This is the macro mode just on one of the lenses. At the back of the lens, there is a macro mode that you can just click in. So you can just click it in, and then you can just turn it to get precise focus, which allows you to honestly be that far away. This is an extra nice to have because it saves you if you're doing a product shoot and you're doing some people in a shop. You don't have to change glass. You can get in tight enough, all right, and then get out for your wide just by clicking the macro collar here at the end here. So it's a very useful extra surprise and delight feature that's built into both lenses.
You jump to the next slide, Jake, because you can see the video went past quickly, but that's the 55mm close focus on the left, and obviously the same shot but with the macro mode activated. And again, it's quite a unique feature to have on the lens, and a lot of people aren't aware of it, which is why I wanted to mention it again today.
Yeah, it's very useful. I've used it several times. It's really nice. It just gets you out of jail.
Okay, so the final part of the MK talk really is just to make people aware that there is a bundle available through CVP where you can purchase both lenses with a hard case with cutouts for them, and there is also 0% finance available because obviously right now times are pretty tough. And if you want pricing or quotes, obviously you speak to CVP and they will definitely help you with that. So if you want to move on, we have a little bit more because while we have people's attention, there's another possible alternative to a pair of MK lenses, which is a Cabrio XK. So obviously the coverage there is not quite the same as the 18 to 135, and it's a little bit faster. But what you have here is a cost-effective. By cost-effective, it's very similar price to a pair of MKs for one of these. It's within the same ballpark. The biggest thing to really point out, I'd say the disadvantage, without being too negative, is obviously this is much larger and much heavier lens.
Yes, it's 2.5 as compared to 1, isn't it? Yeah.
That's right, yeah. But in every other way, as I said before, it's got the cinematic look, it's got the match CCI, it's parafocal, it doesn't breathe, it's optimized for HDR, and it comes with or without a dedicated drive unit. And obviously the without dedicated drive unit is where you become very close to a similar price point to the pair of MK lenses. We were talking earlier on, weren't we, Jim? You were saying about
I was for me on a larger camera like an FX9 with it properly balanced with some weight out the back. The nice thing about it is for documentary and broadcast is you're not actually going to have to swap lens at all. So especially if you're outdoors, where you don't want to expose that sensor at all because you can't change glass, for instance. This is an option there because you can punch in, you can go wide. It's still light enough, I would say, that you can balance it as long as you've got a movable base. You can get that nicely balanced on the shoulder. And by the time you put a V-lock or two at the back, do you know what I mean? You're going to find that nice balance point, which is important. But yeah, I've used it. It's lovely. It will intercut as well I mean, you know, if you hard one of these and you had an MK on another one, for instance, it will absolutely intercut perfectly between the two.
Yeah, it's a really nice lens. Really nice. I've used it a bunch.
These are just a few credits. We found, certainly over in the US, it's been used a lot on very high end, a lot of reality TV in particular, but it's very much a go-to lens over there. It's very popular over here as well. But when I was trying to find some credits, I seem to be find more success finding credits in the US. But these are just some examples of where it's been used. If you go to the next slide. And then talking, obviously, mount options is very important. So natively, this comes as a PL mount. There are two options that you can have if you want to use it on non-PL cameras or cameras that can't have a PL adapter applied. So there's an EF conversion kit by Duclos. That's a kind of, you can do it yourself, but that's a kind of, once you've changed it, you'd kind of do that before you go out shooting. That's now an EF lens. You can't really change it out and about because you need the screws. And there's also IBE do a universal mount system where you take off our PL mount and replace it with the base of their UMS, and then you can click into the UMS any of those mounts. And I think even on the PL and the LPL, it still allows the electric contacts in the lens to still feed through to the camera as well. And then these are, again, as I mentioned before, there's two options because you can get it with a dedicated drive unit or without. They're 0% finance, and obviously CVP sell both versions. So moving on. So the last bit of today is just to talk about a couple of Fujifilm cameras that you may or may not be aware of. So the first one is our X-T4. So this is it's a Super 35 size sensor, which basically in film terms is an APS-C sensor. Shoots full 4K. That's DCI 4K at 60 frames per second, I believe. Yep. And obviously works with the dedicated MKX lenses. You can see the rest of the specs on the screen, so I won't read them out. Although you can't quite see the film simulation modes. I'm actually using an X-T3 at the moment for my thing, whether it's doing it much justice, but I'm using the Atana film simulation. On my screen, I'm looking quite nice and cinematic, but on Jake's screen, I'm looking a little bit warmer. But yeah,
I think
film simulation modes
you look
built
all right.
into it.
At least you're not magenta. At least you're not magenta like me.
Yes, and as you see, so it's got film simulation modes, but you can also, you can shoot. It's got a Fuji F-Log and 10-bit 422 via HDMI. And if you move to the next slide, where it gets really exciting, not that that's not exciting, but where it gets really exciting is the GFX 100. So this is a medium format stills camera. But it also happens to shoot full 4K DCI 4K. No, it isn't DCI. Those must be wrong there. I'll have to check that, sorry. But it shoots 4K from a not quite the full size of the sensor, but very close to, and I'll show you a bit more detail before. Otherwise, it's very similar to the X-T4 in-body image stabilization, 264, 265, etc. Everything you see there on the screen, including the film simulation modes. And if you jump to the next slide, Jake, this is basically, with the camera I've chosen to compare it to, is the Alexa 65. So in stills mode, the big green box you can see there, that's the whole size of the sensor. The big orange, yellow, whatever color that is, box is the open gate of the Alexa 65. But if you look closer in the middle, there's a smaller green box and a smaller orange box, and these are the video shooting mode of the GFX, which is a 47.3 millimeter image circle, and then the 5K 16:9 on the Alexa 65, which is a 48.47. So essentially what you're getting from a camera that doesn't cost a huge amount of money, you can get a similar look to what you would expect using Alexa 65 shooting in 5K mode. And if you jump to the next slide as well, Jake, you can then, we've also just got a comparison of the video shooting mode with some various other cameras that you may or may not have heard of, like the DXL2, Monstro, Alexa, Sony Venice, Canon, and you can see in all cases the GFX 100 will shoot a larger image circle than you're going to get out of those cameras. If anyone has any questions at all, I'm not sure.
There
Jake,
a few, yeah, a few have popped up. A few we have answered. So let's have a look. Featuring the proper. So basically, a guy was just saying how he'd like to see a proper video form factor camera from you guys, which would be interesting, I guess. But it's not really something you guys have done in recent times, anyway.
I'm not aware of any development at the moment. Just to be clear, I work for the optical side rather than the camera side, but obviously the markets are very similar. It's feedback that I have received a lot of times. If you're at BSC Expo or Camera Image and these sort of places, people have asked for it. Our factory, as you saw by those specs there, we're not necessarily taking on the likes of Panasonic's and Sony's just yet, but we're producing some good images, and our factory is listening to the feedback from the market when they're asking for certain features. So I couldn't necessarily speculate, but I would love to see the ability to take our color science that's part of our company for 85 years and combine our lenses with a cinema camera. But I guess the point you were making there is that it's more about the form factor, and the GFX form factor is slightly closer to what people are more used to. But like I said, I'm not sure where the camera roadmap is leading, but all I can see is where we are now and where we were a few years ago is definitely moving in a direction where it would be a waste of time for our factory to make a camera that can record video like this if there was no ambition for people to actually use them to shoot video. And then that's where the customer feedback comes in, because if people do want to shoot them for video but something's not right, something is missing, then we like to sort of gather that information together and feed it back to our factory.
Is it possible to change the MKX lens mount to L mount or micro four thirds like the MKs?
You can, but there's one slight problem, is that there's contacts.
Yeah, you don't. There is another way of skinning that cat as well. So I've used the 20-120 on the S1H because you can fit. I've got, for instance, a Novaflex L mount to PL adapter.
I think you're talking about MKX.
It's MKX.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the MKX has got, because it's got electrical contacts, I'm pretty sure that when you take this off, I'd need to check with someone like MTF Service, but I believe that it's probably not something we'd necessarily recommend, because there's going to, on the E-mount one, there's no electricals inside here. This is just once you remove the mount, you can just put a different mount on. And as I mentioned before, as long as you're very careful with the screws, that can kind of happen as many times as need be. With the MKX, you have got the contacts, so it kind of does limit that slightly, I think.
Are there any plans to offer a similar pair of lenses in PL, even if they are more expensive or a bit heavier? So I think what he means by that is like comparable to the focal length you've got in the MKs.
So would that be somewhere, because obviously we have a Cabrio range already, are you saying, so rather having a shorter versions of the Cabrios perhaps, because we obviously have the 19-90, which is a 2.9,
yeah,
but then becomes quite a bit bigger than the MKs. At the moment, we're not really looking at that area. We're trying to investigate, because of the way the market has started to change the larger sensors. We're definitely looking in that direction to try to work out if there is a possibility to make. Obviously, our Premista lenses were released last year, which is very, very high-end, large format lenses. So we're currently investigating whether there's a possibility to make a more lightweight, cost-effective, full-frame coverage lens. That's kind of ongoing and will be ongoing for a while. And again, I haven't had any information or updates as to whether that is going to happen, but it's something that's been looked at. In regards to like shorter Super 35 lenses, we haven't. It's something I have had people ask for quite, people like Fabian Wagner, who shot some of Game of Thrones, he was specifically asking for shorter focal length zooms, so they're somewhere between a big zoom and small primes. They fit a middle ground, but it's not something that we're currently looking into at the moment.
Tim O'Keefe asks, can you purchase the case that you referred to, the kit, by itself?
I don't know. I can't say no, because that would be ridiculous.
You can make one.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Well,
we do custom ones for people, but yeah, I guess it is easier just to be like, add to basket. Oh, we just lost Mark.
I think my camera's gone.
Oh no.
Oh, see, that's what happens when you don't charge your battery.
Hang on a second. Hold up.
So I can say anything, Mark. Now you can't stop me.
Are we coming back? Oh no! Oh no! You're gonna have to just go on without me.
Carry on.
There's like little flickers every now and then.
Yeah.
There we go.
Oh, you're back.
I can confirm that the charger for my MacBook works on an XT3. So now we can carry on talking until my MacBook runs out of batteries. Now that'll be way too long. No one wants to listen for that. Anyway, sorry. What was the question again?
Oh no, we're talking about the case that you buy the bundle.
Yeah, we haven't got a specific SKU to sell it separately, but I'm sure it's something we can do. Why don't you get in touch with one of the CVP guys and we'll see if that's possible.
Yeah, Tim. Yeah, if you are interested, just drop the sales guys or drop me an email, just Jake at CVP, and I'll forward you on to the right person. How do these lenses? I mean, I presume he's talking about the MKs again, compared to the Canon 15-5-47 and the 30-105 or Ingenue's offerings. I know there are physical differences, but curious about optical qualities.
Canons are much warmer and much heavier and much more expensive.
I mean, with optical quality, and obviously you'd expect me to say this, but for us, as I mentioned before, we've always taken things like MTF graphs and things as quite an important part of what our lenses are able to do. We want the bucket to be full. That's not necessarily right either. I'm not trying to say that you have to use Fuji lenses, because that's ridiculous. But the point is, we try to make accurate lenses with as minimum color shift, as minimum aberration, as minimum distortion. That's our kind of philosophy. And whether you're using a Premista or whether you're using an MK, that we will always try to be somewhere along the same sort of scale. With the Canon lenses, obviously I know that there's sometimes there's difference in weights, and they have different priorities. It's always the case with zoom lenses. It's always about where do you compromise. And I'm sure that there's many shoots where that Canon lenses that just been quoted would be a better fit than an MK or a Cabrio. But there'll also be times where the MK and Cabrios would be a better fit.
It's really hard to recommend someone a lens over the internet. The person needs to come in and test the lens. They need to see the images that each lens produces in exactly the same environment, so they know exactly how each one performs. Because Ingenue, very different. Like you just said, your design philosophy is one thing, but your design philosophy is so different to Ingenue. So someone who buys an Optimo isn't necessarily going to want a Cabrio, and the other way around. It completely depends on what that person wants. And yeah, like you say, like your Premieres, for example, and the Premistas are some of the best performing zooms on the market, like in terms of optical perfection. That is what you guys exactly. So, but exactly like you say, that might not be what someone wants. So it's all about just making sure you get these lenses together and test them. Otherwise, you don't know you're just going to be taking someone's word for it, and that may be a good thing to kind of get get the cogs turning in terms of which one you want. But yeah, you actually test them is so important.
I also think there's a price point where it goes from being owner operator to rental. Yeah,
no, totally.
And what we're talking about with the MKs are a set of lenses that can actually be owner operator. You can afford to buy these lenses, and they punch above their weight. So they absolutely, glass is a personal thing, but what the MKs do is they actually offer you what would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. Because don't forget, if we were to roll back, cinema zooms were these rare, expensive beasts that no one got close to. So we're in a really, really good space now where we have options to choose from.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with the price of the 20 to 120 now, and a Canon just dropped the price of the 30 to 105 as well. That those two lenses, those two sets, lenses are so. I mean, I'd say they are affordable to own at ops now, especially like you say when you're comparing it to two MKs. The 20 to 120 could be a good choice, depending on obviously you can deal, because a lot of documentary people, the documentary shooters I've talked to, look at those two either MKs or the 2120. And that 2mm difference makes such a difference to so many people, and they'll go, "Oh no, I can't. I need it to be wider." So like the amount of people I've spoken to that have, over the years that have gone, "I love this 2120. I just wish it was a 15mm." I'm just like, yeah, but do you realize how much of a difference of the size and the weight that's going to make it? Like it's physics at the end of the day. Like, and lens design has only changed so much over the years. So yeah, designing this perfect lens for everyone is impossible.
But also, you wouldn't put those really heavy ones on a baby camera.
Yeah.
It's working out what you use, camera package, what you're comfortable with, and then finding what fits you.
Everything like this is the same. It's the same with cameras. It's the same with everything. Everything's got a compromise. It's just about which compromise is the compromise you want to make. So yeah, I mean, like the MKs are so popular because they are light, and that is for people who want lightweight, great optics. That's why they buy it. And they buy the compromise is it's E-mount, even though it's flexible with other camera systems. It's not as flexible as some other mounts, but that's the compromise you make if you want a really high quality zoom in such a small package. So it's all about compromise. We really haven't got any other questions at the moment.
Okay.
But yeah, maybe a bit there. Is there a chance to see something like an S1H in XH2? So I think what he means by that is a competitor to the S1H in the H2, if there's one coming up.
I don't know, to be honest, and if I did know, I probably wouldn't be able to say. But I genuinely don't know, I'm afraid. Again, I mean, with the digital cameras, as I said, the fact is, when you just look at the trend of what has been released, to me, they look like they are wanting to become less photo with a bit of video, and they want to hit somewhere where they're either very hybrid or possibly, maybe they could go down a route like Sony, where you go with a stills based and a video based, slightly different versions. Again, don't be taking this as rumors, because this is just me just speculating. But I'm not sure what the roadmap is for cameras, but all I say is it's really, really useful to get feedback from people. So when users or I talk to people like Jake and Sam Measure as well at CVP, because they're obviously talking to you guys, the users, quite regularly and listening to what you're asking for. And that feedback to us is incredibly vital, because we don't want to be making a camera that's either just a Me Too camera or something that people aren't going to want. We want to make something. We want to make all products that are actually have their own place. They have their own shape. That's why our zoom lenses are as they are. They don't really compete with anything else in that respect. And the same would apply for a new camera. We wouldn't just want to try and catch up with someone else. And I think that's where the GFX, to me, is quite an interesting product, because we're not catching up with anyone. We're starting something new, and hopefully, that can be something that we can push on with in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Jim, the question for you: have you used the MK lenses for any commercials at all?
Yes, I have, and because they're absolutely I have. It's not a question of me thinking I must use a prime on this because it's better quality. That doesn't enter my head. They are. I would consider them as good as any prime, and it's the flexibility. And often, contrary to popular belief, a commercial environment where you've got people shouting at you, directors, client, is the environment where you want the most flexibility. You don't actually have the time. Can we do a wide shot? Can we do a tight? Can we get a mid? Can we go back to wide because I didn't like what we had before? Do you know what I mean? So yes, absolutely. I have used them in a commercial environment, and they stand up beautifully. Yes.
And then another one for you. Have you used the MTF L mount adapter or not? Like for the MKs?
Oh, what the L mount, the MTF one?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I have. It works. I haven't shot a tremendous amount with it because it's very, very new. But yes, it goes on. It bolts on, and absolutely, it's quite exciting because it's opening up these lenses to all the cameras, that will have the L mount. So it's again another complete ecosystem for these lenses to exist in. That I can't come back to it. There's one thing to take away because money's tight, and what you invest in, you want to make sure you invest in the right stuff. You can use these on 5 different camera systems. It's that flexibility across brands, for different kind of work, that is really, really important.
Yeah, it's nice to see the RF mount as well. So I'm hoping these shorter flange mounts now becoming more and more popular. So I think with the Komodo having RF as well, that could be a really nice little package. So I'm really excited to see that combo compared and see what people shoot with it.
Yeah, definitely.
Question for you, Marc. What cameras are you a fan of at the moment?
Cameras?
Yeah.
Stills or films or
both. Let's do both. Do one of each or a couple of each.
Well, in the stills world, I'm incredibly biased. Having worked for Fujifilm for quite a number of years, to be honest, actually in the stills world, there's a lot of really good cameras. I do prefer Fuji cameras, but I think it's mostly because of the layouts, etc., and just that they're quite kind of tactile. And every time I've used like a Sony camera is the only other one. I've used Olympus as well, but I love the pictures. Don't get me wrong, but I just found I spent so much time with menus and things, but I also imagine that's a lot down to do with just getting used to a new product. And in the film world, again, I'm not a DP myself, but talking to other people and gleaming their opinions. And if I was a rental house, if I owned a rental house, I'd be a massive fan of a Sony Venice because of what it can do in terms of full frame and Super 35 and Rialto and etc. Obviously, that's not to take anything away from the other guys. I think they're all making very, very good cameras at the moment across the whole board. Canon, RRED, ARRI. There's so much to choose from, and I think it's probably we're in a time now where because the lens is almost the bit that really changes. The cameras are more, can they do the frame rate, and is the workflow going to work? And I know it's not as black and white as that, because there's also things like skin tone rendition and things like that. But generally speaking, I think the exciting bit is the fact that the lenses can change the picture far more. It's not really answered the question, has it?
Yeah, it has. You said Venice.
I like all camera manufacturers equally. I like to have a soft spot for Fujifilm stills cameras.
Yeah, cameras come and go, but lenses should endure. There you
Lenses are for life.
Yeah, totally.
Should be. Exactly.
Not just for Christmas. Not just for lockdown.
No.
Yeah, lenses and lighting and audio and everything else that surrounds the camera.
Yes.
So you mentioned the Black Pro Mist earlier. How much was it you suggested? A quarter?
If you go too far, it looks like a 70s movie. So you have to be a little careful. It's a very personal choice. An eighth is never enough for me.
Which one I
go for a quarter. It does two things. Obviously, takes a bit of contrast out. Looks flattering on your talent, and it will slightly bloom your highlights and your light source. But it is a little bit trial and error. A quarter for me, half's too much.
Quarter's what I use as well. I just had to double check. I wasn't sure if it was a half or quarter.
No, I like a quarter. I like a quarter. And as we said earlier, it's a one-way street. If I want it sharper and more commercial, I just take it off. If I want to make it kinder to my talent and I want a more dreamy aesthetic, I can add diffusion, and that's the beauty of having that full bucket that we talked about earlier as a metaphor. Do you know what I mean? Getting all that information. Sock Monster, to be honest, he'll do anything for food. He's not really fussy. He lives in the garden.
All right, I think that's all the questions. Anything else you guys want to talk about, or Gonna wrap it up here.
Yeah, we can wrap it up here.
I mean, I'm excited. The one thing I will say is with the FX9, I can't wait for the 5K scan mode because I want to see if it works like we talked earlier. I think that's something I'm looking forward to trying. And the Komodo, when it finally arrives in the wild, I think that would be very exciting to see as well.
And not just on the Jared's Instagram feed, which is where you get all
Or Michael Bay commercials.
Oh,
Yes.
God.
Cool.
Cool.
Yeah, if we're wrapping up, just thank you, Jim, for joining me. Thank you, CVP, for hosting us.
No worries.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. And obviously, everyone hopefully stays safe and healthy. We get through this lockdown and normality of some shape and form can resume.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us, guys. Any other questions in the YouTube chat? This will be available live after the stream stops. Just put your comments in there, and one of us will get round to responding to them if there's anything that needs to get answered.
Great.
Thanks very much.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.